All right, welcome into the Your Illini Nation pregame show. Glenn Kinley, WCIA 3 Sports Director. Joey Wagner, 24/7 Sports, Illini Inquirer. Joey, let's just not beat around the bush. This is a huge, huge football game for a number of reasons.
Yeah, it is. It's first ranked game, Glenn, that Illinois had since 2008. Obviously sneaking in at 24 this week. That 20 to 25 range in this part of the season in the AP Top 25 is kind of like, are you undefeated as a Power 4 team? Do you have a Power 4 win? You're in. So now you get a chance to stay there, Glenn. You get a chance to really kind of – the national narrative with this game is, hey, is Nebraska back? Right? They've got this stud quarterback, Matt Rule's rebuilt program.
Yeah.
That's the narrative coming into this game from a national perspective. Bret Bielema in Illinois can say, hey, hold on, and you can wake up on game day tomorrow and it's what's going on in Champaign with Bret Bielema, and I'm sure they'll have him pulled over on a car somewhere on game day, right? Like, that's just how this goes. It's a good chance for Illinois to establish legitimacy, right? Kansas was a big game. You get out of that, and it's like, oh, this is the bowl team. This is a team that can get back to that postseason. You come out of here with a win, and you're rewriting a little bit of expectation. Suddenly, it's this team win 8 games. Can this team be that frisky, weird, next-tier Big Ten team, right, to come into this? So it's a chance for Illinois to, I don't want to say arrive, because that felt like 2022 at Wisconsin, Glenn. Yeah. It's a chance for them to maybe re-arrive or come back on this stage and show that last year was an off year for Bret Bielema and this program, and now they can take this thing back and be that team that's in that 8-win range and maybe debut in the college football playoff top 25. Like, you can really establish yourself on here.
Absolutely. And you talk about the spotlight, the attention that's going to be on this game. You get the Friday night game. You're obviously in prime time. Just the attention that comes with playing Nebraska, right? Like, let's just be honest. Nebraska being the brand that it is in the history of this program, 400th consecutive sellout today, 80,000 or whatever it is expected. This would be a win for Illinois that's bigger than maybe it is just in the record and in the win column because of the exposure that it would bring Illinois. There's probably a lot of people that were going to be rooting for Illinois tonight, maybe the people that don't like Nebraska. And you talked about the Kansas game, and then Kansas goes and loses at home to UNLV.
Did not help Illinois.
It didn't, right? And so with that, now Illinois had what looked like a huge win that now is still a big win, but maybe not as big. And now it's like almost a prove-it week this week to go out and get the big win that maybe we thought Kansas was.
Illinois is not quite in resume building yet, right? So that win is going to hold up because Kansas is still going to be a postseason team. But I think that win more was a win in the moment, right? Like, kind of giving those fans in Memorial Stadium that relief, that moment with each other. And now it's a chance, as you said, to prove that, hey, we're a good team.
Right.
Like, our defense is better, right? Illinois can prove that their defense is better, that Luke Altmaier has taken that step, and that they belong in the conversation as a legitimate top 25 team nationally, which has not been the case. Right? So to show that, okay, it's year 4 of Bret Bielema, you're seeing that tangible step forward, and to come in and beat a ranked Nebraska team, if Illinois can do it, it won't be easy, we'll get into that. That would be a statement, right? And as you mentioned, Fox game, prime time, like this is right there, right? And you can get a lot of conversation about you Saturday morning as everyone's kind of waking up with their coffee and setting the stage for a Saturday slate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to talk about maybe, I don't want to be too negative, but I'm just going to jump right in. Maybe the biggest concern from last week, they didn't look great against Central Michigan. The penalties, though, 10 of them for, I think it was 81 yards, and that's but with your home crowd that's quiet when you're on offense. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel great about now that you got 80,000. You already had 6 or 7 false starts last week. What do you think? Because we were in the press conferences and stuff this week. They were pretty tight-lipped about where that stemmed from, and probably so that the defense couldn't make it happen again. But can you get a sense of why that was? Because only 2 penalties against Kansas.
Yeah, I know Bret Bielema, after the game on Saturday, kind of mentioned that maybe Central Michigan was, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, maybe baiting them into some of that. You've got to be better. You're supposed to be this experienced in terms of snaps in college football, this offensive line. Pre-snap penalties like that, you can't have those. Those kill drives. And on the road, you can't afford to lose 5 yards just because you jump. So I would imagine Bret Bielema, Bart Miller, they've challenged this offensive line this week, I'm sure, in a lot of ways, Glenn. I would imagine that's one of those ways to, hey, you've got to get this cleaned up. Like, you can't. That hurts our football team on the road against a talented Nebraska defense and a quarterback that can make problems for us on the other side.
Absolutely. What are you looking for as far as for Illinois to show progress in tonight, besides maybe just the penalties, because that's an area they need to improve?
I think they need to run the ball better, Glenn. Bret Bielema probably gets a little bit too much of like a a 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense because his good teams have passed the ball effectively, but they still want to be able to run the ball. Like, that is still very important for what they want to do offensively. They don't want to be an air raid, right? They don't want to throw this thing all over, even though right now that's their best offense.
Right,
that's their best path to the end zone and to moving the ball. But they kind of sold us on this, like, hey, we've got this three-headed monster at running back with Caden Fagan and Aiden Lawfrey and Josh McCray.
Yeah.
You've seen Khalil Valentine
I was saying it might be 4 now, yeah.
And then you heard him say, well, we return the interior of the line, and you go get the transfer tackles. Right. But the running game hasn't taken that step,
it hasn't been consistent enough.
And against teams like Eastern Illinois, against teams like Central Michigan, you needed to get that going. You needed to show a little bit more, especially inside. And then you come to Nebraska, and they've got Ty Robinson, and they've got Nash Hutmaker. And it doesn't get any easier, right? Those guys are really good. Nebraska traditionally stops the run well. That's a tough matchup for Illinois. And if you have to put the ball in Luke Altmaier's hands to win the game, you feel comfortable doing that, but you sure as heck would like to be able to run the ball too.
Give me you get a sense of what that running back split might look like as far as, is it time to just give Caden Fagan the ball over and over and over? I love that we've gotten Josh McCray carries in a game that's not close. Khalil Valentine's looked very good. Aiden Lawfrey, I know, was banged up last week, but we know he has potential. But I just want to just give him the ball.
Yeah, I think the thing is in the first 3 games, he hasn't really taken that, right? Like, he's looked a little tentative. The line hasn't helped. He's your most talented running back. And I think eventually that's got to show up on the football field consistently. And when it does, then you need to give him the ball and go, and then compliment him with an Aiden Lawfrey or Khalil Valentine, who is still small, but he can get out there. Those outside runs when Illinois is not able to get inside, those outside runs do a lot of heavy lifting for this offense right now. And Khalil Valentine's got the speed and quickness to make that work.
Do you get a sense of, in the receiving game, is this sustainable for Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant to be? I mean,
I think so.
I think they're good enough, right? But at some point, and this is where the run game comes in too, because at some point the defense, if those two keep doing what they've been doing, they're going to say, we're going to triple team both these guys because you can't run it and we don't need your receivers. So is it important for the receiving game? It's an old cliche of establishing the run, but it feels like it's true in this one.
So interestingly, I feel like Illinois has wanted to run to set up the pass.
Yeah.
Do you flip that?
Yeah.
Right? Do you pass? You throw it around? I thought Luke Altmaier last week and those RPOs, it gives him 3 options, right? You can give it to Caden Fagan, you can get it out to either Franklin or Bryant, or he can keep it. And I thought he had a keeper last week that kind of reminded Central Michigan, he can move, and he can be a factor with his legs. So I think I would like to see Illinois go with that RPO more, and if that means initially getting it out quick to Franklin, getting it out quick to Bryant, and then letting the box kind of soften up a little bit, and then you start running Caden Fagan in there. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe you go the other way now. Maybe you set up the run with the pass.
We talked about that prior to the Kansas game, just the need to maybe you beat them downfield a few times, and then they have to back off a little bit, and then maybe that does open up opportunities for the pass game. Give me your Nebraska preview. You got a quarterback that looks, acts, and sounds a little bit like Patrick Mahomes. We haven't seen, maybe it's too small of a sample size to know if he plays like Patrick Mahomes, but he's playing pretty well, but he's really young.
He's playing well. He's young. This is the best defense that Dylan Raiola, former 5-star, he was committed to Georgia. He's got family ties here. He ended up obviously here, and he's had a really good start. Now, Colorado maybe doesn't look as good as a lot of people think Colorado. Then you've got UTEP and Northern Iowa. So to see this Illinois defense, can Aaron Henry, can that secondary, can they confuse him? Can they try to give him different looks pre and post
just get him uncomfortable?
That's right. Matthew Bailey, I think, is going to be key in that and kind of disguising his look. How can you get Dylan Raiola off of his game and give him something he hasn't seen to this point, Glenn? And the key with him, he gets the ball out very quickly. In terms of Power 4 starters, he's in the top 15. It's like 2.3 seconds he gets the ball out. Can you make him think? Right? Can you give him a different look where he's got to think and let? We saw Alec Bryan almost interrupted our pregame show here. Let guys like him, Gabe Atkins, Seth Coleman, get some pressure, T-Rod Edwards, because he's got to process a little bit more. You've got to confuse him. You've got to make him make a freshman mistake. In a big moment, you've got to have those defensive backs, Xavier Scott, Miles Scott. You got to capitalize on those when he makes them. I don't know if he's going to make a ton of them.
And we talked about it against Kansas that they needed to put Jalen Daniels in situations that he hadn't been in time because of his injury. For Dylan Raiola, it's putting him in situations that he maybe has never been in or hasn't been in since high school when you're playing against much different levels of competition. That's going to be the area for the Illinois defense. You got to win the turnover battle, and then turnovers haven't been a problem for the Illinois offense at all. But you got to keep it that way, and it's just a tough place to play. I mean, we're talking about being thrown into the fire. You go from 3 home games, one of them being a sold-out crowd. You had everybody behind you. You know, you feel good, and then your first road game is not only to Nebraska, but for the Big Ten opener, and it's an anniversary game. It's one that is going to be maybe more packed than usual. It's one of these 100, 200, 300, now 400th anniversary football game. It should be a pretty lively crowd that makes for a tough start to road play.
And on Friday night, the students they moved classes online today. I'm assuming there's been a lot of fun happening outside of Memorial Stadium today. Great area, by the way. The Haymarket District in Lincoln, they do it really, really well here. But yeah, it's going to be lively, and you saw it against Colorado. And obviously, that is a rivalry, right? Colorado, Nebraska. But you saw this place was really on fire here, and I'm expecting something similar. Caleb Griffin, former kicker, is everywhere, just walking by. I would imagine it's going to be a tough atmosphere, a sellout again. You've got to have your offense. You've got to have your offensive line, as we talked about earlier, on top of things, but things can get away in a hurry.
Do you have we've talked about a bunch of them. Is there a key to the game that we haven't discussed that's on your mind?
I think it's in the run game. I think it's both sides of it, Glenn. I think they've got to get the run game going. They have to. This offense doesn't function at max capacity without having that run game. With one of your more talented players, Caden Fagan's got to have that effect. And you've got to stop the run. I don't think Illinois has done that as well as you would have liked to see through the first 3 games. And Nebraska's not afraid. They've got a freshman quarterback. You don't want him to throw it around and make a bunch of mistakes. And they've got a running game that they can establish the trenches. Matt Rule, since he took over here, has rebuilt those trenches on both sides of the ball. And I think that they do things well that Illinois through 3 games has not done well. And it's really in the running game on both sides.
So tell me about the Nebraska defense. We talked about their freshman quarterback. You talked about how good the Nebraska defense is. They haven't let up more than 10 points in a game so far this year. Where are they good? Is it the pass rush? Is it like Illinois is the defensive backs? Do they turn teams over? I know you've done your scouting report because you know every recruit that's ever talked to Illinois, so I know you know about Nebraska. Tell me.
Their defensive front is good. Ty Robinson is an NFL player. He is going to jump off film. He is a massive individual. Nash Hutmaker, massive. They call him the polar bear. He's a massive man. Those 2 up front really lead the way, and they can get pressure around that. Then they have Tommy Hill, defensive back, who's he guard? Who do you put him on? Do you put him on Bryant? Do you put him on Franklin? How do they affect that? I think Illinois can move the ball well through the air.
Who would you put him on? It seems like Luke throws to Zakari every 3 plays.
He does. That's exactly right.
Until they get to the red zone, then he throws the pass.
That's right. It's probably Zakari, right? You would maybe think you put him on him.
Put him on in the red zone.
Yeah. That's a tough matchup for them, right? And I think Illinois can exploit that a little bit. Just these 2 wide receivers, Glenn, we should talk about them for a second because you're starting to see more national really buzz with those guys. Pat Bryant's got 4 touchdowns already. Really remarkably consistent. He's playing himself into being a draft pick. He really is. And I don't remember who I was reading the other day. They said, is he a top 50 guy? That might be a little high because his lack of top-end speed, but he's big. He's more consistent. He does have enough speed, right? And then Zakari Franklin has been on draft boards. Ole Miss didn't go his way. He was injured. He's getting a chance. I thought Bret Bielema nailed it a few weeks ago where he said, we needed an outside receiver, and Zakari needed a chance. It is more or less what Bret Bielema said. And you're seeing him make the most of that. Those 2, they have really exceeded expectations, I think, through the first 3 games. And it helps when your quarterback is playing at a high level. Luke Altmaier is playing at a really, really high level. And then you kind of complement that with your Malik Elsie's. Colin Dixon quietly has a really nice start to the season.
He was on the field a lot last week. I noticed him.
That's right. So they've got options beyond those top 2. But, man, the way those top 2 are playing, it gives Illinois a chance going into any game because they can change games quickly.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what I've seen from both of them, and I think maybe from Pat especially, he can just make a variety of catches, right? I mean, he can go up and get the football. He can beat you down the field on a go route, and he can come across the middle on a slant or whatever. It has to be good for Luke Altmaier to know that, hey, no matter what route he's running here, Pat might be open. And it goes for Zakari, too. Zakari has become what I think any quarterback needs. Obviously, when you love depth, you love to have 5 guys he's comfortable with. You love to have in this case, maybe the 1-2 punch. But I always think it's good to have a go-to guy. Let me find that guy. And it seems like in a short time, Zakari has become that for Luke. I don't know how many. I think he had maybe 9 catches last week at Zakari, and he had to have 2 or 3 more targets. They're looking his way often, and why wouldn't you?
He gets open. He's a professional route runner. He may not be the biggest guy. He may not be the fastest guy.
He's not the most talkative.
That's right. No, he's certainly not. But there's value in getting open for your quarterback to find on some of those intermediate throws, those RPO throws, Glenn, as we talked about. So I think you're right. You nailed it. I think he's that go-to guy when you're between the 20s.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously you see Pat Bryant make plays in those regards.
Right.
Then you get to the red zone. Pat Bryant's a big target. And you're right. He can go up and get it. He can make a contested catch in the end zone. That's a good combo to have. And again, Luke Altmaier is playing good football right now. He's making right decisions. He looks comfortable in the offense. He's executing that RPO. He's really making this whole thing go offensively. And again, you're just waiting, like, when does the running game establish itself into this to round out this offense?
And it feels like one of 2 things need to happen, or both tonight. The run game has to establish itself, or Luke is going to be forced to make plays that he hasn't made yet, or maybe has tried to make before and hasn't done it. We talked about it last week, and I talked about it in my post-game show as well, but Luke has just been a field general in the sense that he has managed the game very well. He's done what he can, and he hasn't forced much. He's taken what's given, and he hasn't done maybe anything too crazy. He's had a couple really good throws, don't get me wrong, but he's just kind of taken what – and so tonight – either the run game gets going and Luke can hopefully continue to do that, or maybe the run game can't get going and Luke has to either try to force some or squeeze him in windows that he's not as comfortable with. And then we find out, can he do that? Maybe the answer is yes. The preferred answer probably is that he doesn't have to do that because the run game starts going.
That's right. And he's made big-time throws, man. I mean, just high-level throws and just in big moments. That little against Kansas, that little check out to Caden Fagan, that wasn't a throw that's going to lead his highlight tape, right? But in that moment, incredibly big throw. You're right. If Nebraska can take away the run and sit in the pass, he's going to have to make some difficult throws. I think he can shoehorn himself into the run game, and he can have some of those quarterback keepers with the Nebraska defense has to say, okay, that's right. He can do this, and he can change it a little bit and find a way to open the running lane for Caden Fagan, Aiden Lawford, Khalil Valentine, Josh McRae. I think his feet could be a big factor here, especially if they struggle to get going on the ground with the backs.
Well, I was going to mention, we talked before about Luke's running ability being one that maybe doesn't, it's not the first thing you prep for, but he lulls you into, okay, Zakari, Pat, Tanner Arkin, Zakari, and now I'm running. And if he can, one of 2 things I think happen tonight, if this goes well for Illinois. Either one, right off the bat, he beats you with his legs. And then the rest of the game, that linebacker, that way, right? Just has that split-second motion where now Zakari's by him because he was watching Luke to run. Or the opposite, maybe he doesn't run that much early. Maybe the running backs get going a little bit, and then by the 4th quarter, he's taken off one time for 6 yards, and the defense kind of forgets about it, and then on a crucial drive, he gets out and run. I think it has to be either established early, and if you don't find it early, you have to use it late, I should say, when you may have gotten them to forget about it over the course of 3 quarters.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what we've seen Luke Altmaier really be his best. And then even if it's not a scramble, it's just some of those design draws where he follows his blockers really well and is able to navigate through traffic. I don't know that Illinois is going to win. I don't know if they can get out of here without him having an impact. Now, what's that look like, right? That could be 25 or 30 yards that just come at really, really critical moments in the game. It doesn't have to be Luke Altmaier ran for 80 yards and changed the game. It's just the threat of it, right? And being able to keep a defense honest and try to just make Nebraska think for a second because their defense is sound, physical, their coordinator's really, really good. This is far and away the best defense that Luke Altmaier has had to see all year.
Yeah. What do you want to see from Barry Lunny Jr. and the Illinois offense from a play calling standpoint? Because we're talking about establishing the run and how crucial it is to get the run game going. But at what point do you not be stubborn about it and say they're not going, throw it to Zakari or throw it to Pat or whatever it may be? How does Barry Lunny, if you were the Illinois offensive coordinator, how would you handle that? And what do you think he'll do tonight?
I think until you see that run game go, I think you're getting to the point where you got to throw to set up the run. You got to try to lighten up that box a little bit, throw it around, make Nebraska take a safety out of there, and then see if you can get Caden Fagan to the second level. And then how do you line up? What formations do you go with? I think Caden Fagan, I don't know that Illinois is super comfortable in an I formation, right? But a pistol, where Caden Fagan has a head of steam and can read a little bit on that offensive line to get in there and make some moves, get a couple extra yards. Those are the two things I'm looking for. I don't know how you wouldn't right now throw the ball, come out, throwing, and that doesn't mean 5 wide.
Right. We're not talking about 80 yards down the field on 1st and 10. Yeah.
It just means look like a team that's willing to come in here and throw this thing around to win it, and then see if that'll open something up for your backs. These are talented running backs, right? And the offensive line, I think, is going to take eventually that step forward is going to happen because that interior has played too much football together for this to be what it is all season long. And now they're pass blocking fine. That is night and day from last year where they couldn't pass block, but they could run block. But I just think eventually it will get going because the talent is there. Right. The continuity on the line is there. Unless Illinois starts moving it around, does Brandon Henderson find himself more snaps? Seems like we hear his name every single postgame because he's the guy they want to get on the field. And is that at one of those guard spots today?
And I always think there's a healthy balance from a play calling standpoint of creativity. I think so often you see offensive coordinators be creative just for the sake of being creative, and it's like you're getting pretty with it, and now you're overdoing it. But maybe that is a way to get it going for Illinois, whether that's the jet sweep. Did we see Illinois run a flea flicker last week?
We did. We did see them do that.
I didn't know
that it worked out as well as they
one that just put it on tape so that Nebraska has to be ready for it. But finding that balance of creativity and how creative is too creative, and can you I'm sure there's plenty of stuff through 3 weeks, although maybe they had to pull some stuff out against Kansas, but Central Michigan and Eastern Illinois, they probably didn't show too much. So what do we see from the Illinois? Is it another flea flicker? Is it something different? Is it a wide receiver pass or whatever it may be?
Do they go back to – I thought against Eastern Illinois, those 2-back sets where Caden Fagan opened the lane for Aiden Lawfrey worked really, really well. And it was something different because right now your tight ends are struggling. Right. They just are. But your running back, you do have talent there. So you try to figure out a way more and more to have some of those sets where you have both of those guys on the field and maybe Aiden Lawfrey's in the slot and he motions around like we had seen. Do they unload that? We haven't seen that really much since that Eastern Illinois game.
We're with you for about 5 more minutes. This is the UR Illini Nation WCIA 3 pregame show. We're talking about Illinois, 24th ranked Illini taking on 22nd ranked Nebraska. Sellout crowd expected here as always in Lincoln. It's the first road game for Illinois. It's the Big Ten opener for Illinois. It is a hot one. We intentionally posted up in the shade. Actually, I guess that was probably the only spot we were allowed down here on the field. But we're happy to be in the shade, though. I'm assuming it will cool down as the shade covers more of the stadium, but this is not your average night game in mid to late September.
Not yet. It's your first trip to Nebraska?
It is, yes.
What do you think? You got to ask.
It's pretty sweet. I mean, those seats up there, I don't know how much our viewers can see them. They're up there, man. Yeah. You're up there, so I'm glad that I'll be down here on the field. I think it might get.
They do a good job here. The student section is on top of the field, and similar in Iowa is another kind of like that.
Right.
That's where that noise comes from, right? Yeah. That's where it gets really difficult.
And it's right behind the end of this Illinois bench on that side.
They've been here for a little bit. Yeah. They've been out in the sun for about 3 hours, probably a little hydrated, I would imagine, sitting there. So I expect a really good environment. Nebraska always has a good one. And, again, I think Nebraska realizes nationally what this could be for them. And I would imagine that Bret Bielema has explained to his team what Nebraska realizes this could be nationally for them. And then, conversely, how Illinois could spoil that and what it could mean for them and the perception of his program going into Penn State, another ranked game next week.
Yeah, Illinois, I think, has everything to prove in this game. I was listening to a college football podcast earlier in the week, and one of the guys said, well, Nebraska hasn't really played anybody. And then the guy said, well, we're gonna find out about them this weekend. And the guy said, well, are we? They're just playing Illinois. Illinois has a chance to prove that you're not just playing Illinois, right? And that's what they're trying to get to. You did it a little bit against Kansas. You take care of business the other 2 games. The more that you can, wins like this go a long way to where it's a matchup that others should get up for. And not only should they get up for, but they should be a little bit worried when Illinois comes to town. I don't know if that's the case right now.
That's not to say
absolutely.
Right?
That's not to say that that teams view it as an easy win, but it's not one where you look at your schedule yet and say, oh no, we're doomed for that one. You got to get there and start with road wins like tonight.
I think the perception how teams view Illinois is different than how nationally Illinois is viewed. there's a lot of respect for Bret Bielema and his coaching staff throughout the Big Ten and beyond. But to your point, I think nationally, you see people say, those teams are ranked? What do you mean?
Right.
So it's a chance for them to say, look, both these teams can say, hey, we could be in the top 25 when that college football playoff poll drops, and we could be that next rung in the Big Ten beyond your Oregons, your Ohio States, your Penn States. If you're going to put Michigan in there at this point, that's a good spot for Illinois to be in. And games like this, Glenn, this is why you bring in Bret Bielema as your head coach, is to have moments like this game in the past. And I hate to keep going back to the past, but I think perspective is important.
Yeah, it is.
With when you're talking about games of magnitude in September. This has been in the past, a 10-point Nebraska, double-digit Nebraska win. All right, same old. By the way, when does State Farm Center open up here, right? But Bret Bielema is changing that, and you feel a little bit more of a pulse around this football program, just people, fans invested in what's happening here, and you're starting to see that national recognition pick up more and more.
Yeah, it's certainly important. As we've got a couple more minutes with you here on the Illini Nation Kickoff Show. As Illinois starts 3-0, you get the win over ranked Kansas, and there's anticipation build. Have you seen a recruiting boost? I mean, they got one commit last week. I don't know if it happens that quickly, but even in maybe how the guys who are giving Illinois the time of day are paying attention, even if it hasn't shown off in commits yet.
I think in 26, some of those kids in 26 are still so early in this process, but you're getting more traction. You'd like to come back for Purdue or Michigan later this month? Great. And then in 25, it's if they said no in the summer, do they maybe give Illinois a call back? There's a kid last week on campus, Donovan Starr. He's committed to Auburn. Illinois was really invested in him over the summer. He commits to Auburn. And all of a sudden, it's like, you know what? I'd like to come check it out. A Bloomington normal kid who had moved to Tennessee.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is, can you build traction with some of those guys who said no initially, and maybe things aren't paying off there, or they're just like, hey, this program's winning, right? I liked everything about it. Now you're seeing the wins. I think that's something that you'll see probably as you get further into October and November, getting the signing day. As
we wrap up here your Illini Nation pregame show, let me tell you about what's coming up. We're going to have any postgame coverage we can tonight on WCIA at 10. The game likely still going on, so I don't know how much we'll be able to tell you or share with you then due to video restrictions and that stuff. I'll have one more hit coming up here at 6 on WCIA News, and of course we'll do the 3-in-1 podcast. You've got your own podcast you're doing after the game. Are you guys record that tonight, tomorrow morning on the drive back? When can our listeners, viewers, readers expect that up? And what other post-game coverage do you have for it?
We'll have our podcast live on YouTube after media availability. So 11, 15, 11:30 in that neighborhood. Jeremy will have his takeaways from this game. We'll have stories on what happened, right? Whether that's Illinois wins and what it means moving forward, or what's next as you go in to Penn State. And obviously we'll follow up throughout the week. And then Bret Bielema press conferences on Monday, and we start it all over again.
Well, even just for the next week and making the next week fun for the fans, for the media, certainly for the team, a win tonight would go a long way in addition to all the things that we just talked about. Closing thoughts. We talked about the run game. We talked about establishing the run as Barry Lundy Jr. steps out on the field here and gets ready to go. Closing thoughts on Illinois, Nebraska as we are just about an hour from kickoff.
It's a huge chance for Illinois, as we've talked about at length, to establish itself. And it's a chance for Luke Altmaier. If that run game doesn't get going, Luke Altmaier can establish himself as that top third in the Big Ten, top fourth in the Big Ten quarterback. And now suddenly it's, hey, this former four-star recruit has figured it out at Illinois. He was benched last year, not really in his doing. That's been the conversation. Hey, Luke Altmaier's off to a good start after he was benched last year. There's a lot more context there. John Paddock was on an Peter. But now you can change that to, hey, look at this four-star who's at Illinois, really navigating this offense, the 4-0 start, and moving up in those rankings into that 20 range.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time. As always, the Illini Nation pregame show. We're just about an hour from kick. WCIA News at 6 should be starting right now. Pull that up, and I'll have a report for you here in a few minutes. And we'll preview the game one last time there before we kick off here